what I call the trinity of exemplary problems, and they set out 3 problems. First, that's if you modify or have a new use of system components. So you modify the hardware or you use them in a new way. Alternatively, another thing is the program is determined by technical entities outside the computer. That's usually when you have a machine control, ABS brake, washing machine, and so on and so forth. And then the third category is the problem takes into account the technical features of a data processing system. So you have a non-technical problem, but you have to modify the operation of your device to implement this non-technical problem. So far, so good. And that was at this point non-limitative, just exemplary. Let's see what happened in subsequent case law. We had a decision by the Federal Court of Justice, High Court again, but in a different composition, that this 3 problems, this trinity of exemplary problems, is exhaustive. In this decision, they just went through this list and said we have neither of these 3 problems, and hence we don't have a technical problem at all. That was an approach that was not explicitly followed in the 2 or 3 subsequent decisions, and not explicitly confirmed, but it's still there. I'm aware that at least the chairman of the division of the Federal Court of Justice does not entertain this idea, but there are apparently different opinions within his division. However, even in the subsequent decisions, we had some indications what could not be a technical problem, and one proposition was that data processing in general is not a technical problem. So if you just process data, it cannot solve a technical problem, which of course is frequently detrimental for all application software. And even improved user-machine interaction is not considered to relate to a technical problem. So, for example, if you reduce the number of input operations, or you improve the display of information for selection by a user, was considered not to involve a technical problem. If we look what the lower court, the Federal Patent Court, did, they were fairly on the restrictive side. They were very happy to have this catalog of 3 problems, and they consider it exhaustive, so the decisions always go, we have none of these 3 problems, and that's it. And then they say a technical problem can only be related to technical features, which is at odds in a way to the decision I cited previously when the Federal Court of Justice said that even software can contribute to a solution of a technical problem by technical means. So they're still, as I said at the beginning, going back to the old ways. They're tending to the hardware approach is forbidden. They try to avoid it to say so explicitly, but the old thinking is still there. And again, no technical problems are data processing of any kind or anything that's related to ergonomics. When we come to Inventive Step, the general principle is again similar to the EPO. You consider only the features that determine or influencing the solution of a technical problem, and you leave out the clearly non-technical features, but the non-technical features are traditionally used as the basis of formulating the problem. For example, if your claim is related to the implementation of a business method, you would formulate the technical problem for a technical person, that the problem is to implement this business method of a computer given the case with further limitations such as little storage demand or quick processing or whatsoever. So let's see what has come out of it. And basically it's always a game of not considering certain features in the claim. And here you feel a tendency that the courts, even the Supreme Court, frequently go by the mere wording and they don't look what's technically connected with the wording. For example, if, to give you a simple example, if somebody says a computer writes information, of course it's not a mental activity that a little green man is sitting there and writing something somewhere. It's a shorthand term for a fairly complex technical process involving modification of physical states in the storage media. But writing is associated with this technical process, although writing as such would be some human activity. But nevertheless, what is not considered features related to producing information, unless this creates technical difficulties. I mentioned already the steps of displaying information for selection by a user and of user selection. And in this notorious decision 121/9, sampling, processing, storing, and transmitting data. When I give you this list, it's not necessarily to be expected that the next decision will go by these lists, but it has been set out in decisions, and at least when you're prosecuting before the German authorities, you should be aware that such features will not be excluded, will not be considered. And in Inventive Step, just a list of things that were not considered as technical features. That was comparison of bit patterns in access control. That was basically the basic mechanism of access control. You enter a certain passphrase or certain data, which are compared to stored data, and they say, well, it's nothing than data processing, neglecting that it's in a larger technical process, and only by the step of comparing, you open access, for example, to a storage media or to a very physical device like a door. Mapping, another one was mapping data of categories in filter for directing emails to different storage locations, so that they say, well, if you sort in a filter, your emails coming in so that they automatically go to different folders. That's not technical, it's just a mental implementation of mental activity. 3D to 2D mapping, content of data, rules of a business method, the list could be prolonged. So you can see the approach of the Federal Patent Court is fairly restrictive. Towards the end of my presentation, I would like to give you an example how this is approached, and it refers to something that many of you know. It simply relates to the slide of unlock feature on the iPhone and possibly on other smartphones. You all know it. There is a little button on a rail, and you have to slide it from left to right to unlock the screen. This was invalidated in the first instance, I think, end of 2013 or early 2014, by the Federal Patent Court. It's pending in appeal, I guess. And basically, leaving the details of the claim aside, but the distinguishing features which were undoubtedly distinctive over the prior art were that you had to move a graphical interactive object, that is this little button, along a predefined display path, that was this rail you have displayed on the screen in accordance with user context, that put your finger on it and you slide from left to right. It was fairly broad, and basically what the court did, they simply neglected these features. They said they're not technical, so we don't have to consider them. So what's in the claim is, what we have in the claim to be considered is not more than the prior art, and so it's not inventive. And the reasoning was basically, well, first it's graphical presentation of information, and then they said, well, the whole concept relies on optical feedback because you need a mental activity to see that suddenly this little button is no longer moving, or that it got back and you have to do something else. And then they had a standard reason which you find in many decisions. They said the device is just the same. All you do is do some display, and the technical function is not altered. And I would put at least a question mark to the letter. Of course the technical function is altered. It's a functionality you don't have in other phones. But they said, simply say, this does not count. It's still the iPhone. So they just consider the naked iPhone without the apps, without the graphical user interface, and that's of course fairly restrictive. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I think it was apparent that we have a tendency with the German courts to limit patentability to interaction with a technical device outside the data processing device or the basic operation of a hardware, or adaptations of a non-technical method to the operation of a computer. In Germany, this is construed narrowly. I may say that I see similar tendencies in the practice of the examiners at the EPO. If it's too much into the abstract, then you will usually get problems, or frequently get problems, also at the EPO. And then we have